the way I'm kind of thinking about this and what I've learned is people will show up and they think they want a TMS, right? And they kind of do, but what they really want is transformation.
Right.
So what they've been doing is been running on a set of systems and processes probably for at least a decade, maybe even longer. Like one of my kind of strong beliefs is you replace these systems maybe every 10 years. Right, and so they're coming and they've basically got to a point where they've lived in this box and they can't kind of live in it anymore. But the box is never just the TMS, right? Because what's happened in the industry, and you know this more than anyone, is like the customers have become more sophisticated, the brokers have become more sophisticated, the shippers have become more sophisticated, and that's putting pressure on the carriers. And so suddenly they've got a pressing need to actually run their business differently.
You're listening to Freight Famous, presented by Rose Rocket, bringing you the people that make trucking move. From behind the scenes into the limelight. Here's your host, Justin Bailie.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Freight Famous, a podcast produced by Rose Rocket. New episodes of Freight Famous will be released about twice a month. On this podcast, we talk with guests about how they build, scale, and automate their trucking and transportation businesses. Before I introduce our guest today, I'm excited to tell you about Rose Rocket's TMS referral program. I mean, my excitement is probably waning because I do say this on pretty much every podcast now, but I'm still pretty excited about the general opportunity. If somebody you know is looking for a TMS, Rose Rocket would love to have you join our incentivized referral program. To learn more, email us at referralpartners@roserocket.com. That's referralpartners@roserocket.com, and a member of our team will be sure to be in touch. I'm your host, Justin Bailie, co-founder at Rose Rocket. I'm excited to introduce my guest today, TIm Hopkins. Tim is a hands-on software leader and architect with 2 decades of experience delivering enterprise systems. He's done everything from delivering large custom-built financial service loan platforms, multi-year public sector systems in welfare and healthcare, CRM platforms to transform sales, service and marketing, and delivering web and mobile applications into users' hands within weeks. He's primarily worked for large consulting organizations, including a consulting partner in the Big Four firm, and is currently, get this, VP of Enterprise here at Rose Rocket. Welcome, Tim.
Pleasure to be here.
I can't believe you are here. So when you read through that entire bio, and obviously I've had the privilege of knowing you for the probably half year to year that you've worked here now. Mm-hmm. I'm actually curious because I wasn't intimately involved in the hiring process at all. I've sort of reputation is really how I knew you through this. How are we so lucky to have you come and work here? And I guess in a sense of why do you want to be here?
Yeah. So it's a bit of a weird story. So I grew up in this tiny town in New Zealand, right? 15,000 people. The primary thing was farming, but I turned into a teenage computer hacker, and not a benevolent one either. I wrote viruses and stuff, and
wait, you did or you didn't?
I guess probably statute of limitations has passed, right?
Right. Yes, of course.
Far enough away from the jurisdiction. I'm probably okay.
Yeah.
But so I did all this kind of stuff, and kind of got to most of the way through high school, and I was like, this has got to stop.
Yeah.
Right. So actually went to law school. So went and spent 5 years training to be a lawyer. And kind of got to the end of that, and I was like, I don't really want to be a lawyer. I did a summer job, and they had me do discovery, and I was stuck in a records room, so it was just kind of awful. So I got to the end of it. And one of the consulting firms kind of found me, and they're like, you've kind of got an interesting profile, right? You've got this law background, you've got this liberal arts background, you seem to know your way around technology. Why don't you come and join our technology practice? And so I did, and then the rocket kind of took off a little bit. And so, started in New Zealand and did a bunch of stuff. Then suddenly I was in the UK, then suddenly I was in Australia, and, bounced around a little bit through Asia Pacific. And then suddenly, I was in Canada, helping to deliver these really big things and kind of going through that progression, right? The career progression everyone goes through. So, I rocked up on my first day and I was the junior Java developer that nobody kind of trusted, right? And then, a couple of years in, they were like, okay, you seem like you kind of know what you're doing. You reckon you could look after some people? And yeah, I can do that. I mean, God bless them. I don't know how they felt about it.
Yeah.
And it was all right, you reckon you could run a project? And it's yeah, I can run a project. I'm hungry for this opportunity. And they're oh, okay, you didn't make a complete mess of that. You reckon you could run an account? It's yeah, I can run an account. Of course I can run an account. And they're like, okay, like you did some good stuff there. The customer's still happy. You sold some stuff. You reckon you could do some other things? And so that was it really. Like what I wake up in the morning is like I'm a software developer. That's like, the thing I get excited about. But for me to have interesting work and for there to be interesting work for the people around me, I've always had to kind of learn how to sell and look after an account, look after a team and do all those kind of things. And the opportunities have got bigger and bigger and bigger, whether it's like, selling transformations for like network companies or, helping make sure people can get the latest iPhones or, even things like, making sure that, when we went through the whole COVID thing, that people had information and applications are going to support them. The opportunity just kind of kept coming here. And then kind of put my head up above the parapets and like saw all the interesting work going on at Rose Rocket and seeing like, taking that enterprise software thesis and transformation and like, oh yeah, the TMS, like this is kind of one of the last areas to transform. And like, I've seen some stuff, I could be useful here. And that's how I came through the door.
Cool. I mean, yeah, you're certainly useful here. And the time we've spent together, it's been really impressive to work with you and just see you work. And as we're interacting together with clients and things like that, it's really it's an area of the business that we are relatively new to in terms of I think having a meaningful story, narrative, and product for the enterprise. And so as we think about moving into that and having really smart folks like yourself join us, as you're kind of coming into now full stack TMS, and I do know you've had some supply chain experience prior to coming here, but like what are you seeing or what have you learned since you've come here, sort of jumped the fence, or maybe as it pertains to customers and some of their challenges they're having, or just maybe that you can take that question as broadly and take it in any direction you actually want.
Yeah, the way I'm kind of thinking about this and what I've learned is people will show up and they think they want a TMS, right? And they kind of do, but what they really want is transformation.
Right.
So what they've been doing is been running on a set of systems and processes probably for at least a decade, maybe even longer. Like one of my kind of strong beliefs is you replace these systems maybe every 10 years. Right, and so they're coming and they've basically got to a point where they've lived in this box and they can't kind of live in it anymore. But the box is never just the TMS, right? Because what's happened in the industry, and you know this more than anyone, is like the customers have become more sophisticated, the brokers have become more sophisticated, the shippers have become more sophisticated, and that's putting pressure on the carriers. And so suddenly they've got a pressing need to actually run their business differently. They think a TMS is going to get there, and it is part of the solution. But increasingly, what I see my job is actually just trying to give some good advice, right? Like, we can put in a new TMS for you, and we'd love to do that. But that's only going to get you part way unless you think about your business processes, unless you think about finance, unless you think about the products that you're actually selling. So pulling that all together and kind of orchestrating it, that's what actually leads to success for a customer that, a sophisticated customer that will come to our door wanting to replace the TMS platform that they are on.
And what are some of the new... If you're changing every 10 years, and I think that's a reasonable sort of heuristic anyway. And so if you're doing that, what are you seeing that people are hoping, like what are you gaining from like, why not just run it for another 10 years? Like what is really the impetus to even do anything at all, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, there's like, if you think of kind of the macro kind of stuff that's going on in enterprise software, like there's migration to the cloud. Right. And so I don't want to run servers anymore. I don't want to be paying for someone to look after those servers. I don't want to be leasing them if you're leasing them. Right. And there's actual real tangible benefits to doing that in terms of your operating costs and things like that. But also what happens is systems degrade over time. Right. You integrate them, you customize them. You can't remember why you customize them. People learn to live within it. You want to evolve your product strategy, but you can't do it anymore. Right, so you can live within it, but what it stops is it's a hard stop on your business actually evolving. You work around that for a while, but eventually you can't work around it anymore. And then somebody, God bless them, wakes up one day and goes, "Look, I really have to tackle this. I really have to take this on." But what it is it's a half decade of wanting to evolve the business with a hard stop on the systems that they actually have.
Yeah. How do you think about taking somebody from a system that is a legacy system, we'll call it, that is, as you said, it's built for their, I'm going to be careful here. I want to use like air quotes for those listening. Use air quotes to say it's built for their business, because I think what you alluded to this, it's built for past customer demands that have kind of created this workflow debt, if you will. And now your entire organization runs on these workflows. They don't really know why they do it anymore. And probably that customer's already left 6 years ago anyway, so there's no really even reason to do it that way. But it becomes hard-coded in how we do things. Yeah. So when somebody's thinking about making a shift, I know if I'm thinking about it through the customer's lens, like the thing that really gives me heart palpitations is thinking about lifting and shifting from an existing set of work. Like, it's just so much easier not to do anything.
Yes.
And so, like, how do you make the case, or at least maybe if you're an executive in the organization, how can you kind of sell yourself on the concept that this is something that we need to do, or not in a sense that we need to, because I think that's actually a relatively well understood concept. It's like, how do you move from a legacy system to a more modern, not just architecture, but probably if it's a more modern system, it's going to be what I like to call tech rich but feature poor, maybe. And so how do you reconcile that?
Yeah. So I mean, the first place I think you have to start is this like a family like trucking podcast?
We can swear.
Yeah.
That's what you're asking.
Yeah. Make sure.
Like we can fucking swear.
That's what I'm like. Are we on the after 8 p.m. edition? Yeah, I think the first thing you've got to recognize is that it takes just a fuckload of bravery to be that person.
Yeah,
who wakes
that's
up,
exactly it.
And who wakes up and goes, all right, I need to actually make a change. It's an enormously disruptive change to this business. Yeah. Right. So you've got to acknowledge that the person in front of you, right, who is starting to commit to this path, is really putting their career on the line. And like you said, like these systems are around 10 years, it's probably 2 people ago who actually put this thing in.
Right.
So how do you make the case for this stuff? Like, you start with like, well, what is the vision that you want to enable? Like, you've got to be rooted in a business vision, not a technology vision. Right. So like, we want to be able to serve our customers in a different way. We want to be able to reduce the cycle times. We want to more efficiently use our assets. And sometimes what you'll do is you'll actually have this conversation with someone. You're like, you kind of don't need a TMS.
Right.
Like, there's a bunch of things that you can do before I would go shopping for a TMS. And, it's like, give them some good advice, part as friends. Right? And then, I hope that we do that on our good days. But then it's like, all right, well, how do I sequence this stuff? Like, if I want to do this, okay, well, this is the implications for my organization, my technology, the people who are going to have to change as well. And I figure out, okay, well, this is where we're going to start. And it might be pretty boring stuff. Like, we might be picking up servers and actually putting them onto AWS or into Azure or something like that. And then, okay, now that we've unlocked this, we can unlock the next thing. And this is where we might start to see tangible business benefits. It's like, okay, well, the first thing we need to do is replace your finance system. Have a great conversation with the CFO, trying to figure out what they are trying to do to unlock value and actually get that in there. And okay, the next thing we need is maybe some analytics, right? Because we don't really understand what's going on with this business. And so, okay, we can unlock a bunch of value there. We can look about, hey, how can we better serve business stakeholders and get them the information they need? And then we might be thinking about the TMS. So the TMS might be the third or fourth thing down the line, because there's a bunch of prerequisite work that we've got to do. And there's a bunch of value we can unlock before we really go after the beating heart of the organization. But it's kind of leading them through that. It's giving them a well thought out plan, which is actually achievable, and highlighting, what is the cost and the benefits that they're going to get in an informed way, right? So you're not selling them pie in the sky, but something which is actually relatively achievable. And what is the pull on the organization while this actually happens? Because you're still trying to run a business. Like, we're going to be taking people out of the business to do things. Yeah. Like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, and it's a good call. Like, when you think about transformation, that's a really key point, that it's not just simply the TMS. There are so many applications that are plugging into this, increasingly more too, because we're talking about sort of the massive sort of systems of record. Yeah, there's point solutions that are also related to all of this and how those flow and what you've got built into those. So when you kind of take on that because that's a journey, what you just described, or that is a journey, that is a multi-year journey, most likely, in sort of in mid to large organizations. So as you think about the customers and the prospects that you've been talking to since you've been here, because I do have to just say this, I think for context setting, we as an organization, Rose Rocket, for the listeners, have moved into a more meaningful approach towards larger accounts and larger businesses with a more sophisticated product offering, and we've had a groundswell of opportunities in that space over the last few months. It's been pretty remarkable. So we've been having a lot of conversations. What are you seeing sort of as a common thread? So there's maybe a TMS isn't what you need because you're just looking for this sort of basic thing, and you'll say, here you go, we're still friends, call me when a TMS makes sense.
Yep.
When is it abundantly clear that TMS does make sense?
Yeah, so I mean, you get in there and you start having conversations and you start seeing what the TMS has become within the organization. So we started 10 years ago and we had this beautiful, clean system that matched our business processes. As that evolved, it's picked up debt and you see people trying to use it, right? And so suddenly it's a dozen clicks to actually do a simple business operation, right? That's taking time, that's causing frustration, that's work that has to happen to enable something which can't be spent somewhere else. So that becomes kind of pretty obvious. You talk to the IT stakeholders and the things that they want to do, which they can't do because maybe there's not the APIs available. Maybe it's all stuck on-prem and we can't do some kind of integration that we'd love to do. Maybe we can't do something as simple as enable like a single password across all of the systems, right? Just because of the way these things kind of work. And then you kind of step back and you look at the workforce, right? Like, so one of the things which has kind of happened, like when I started my career, maybe when you started a career, like kind of the expectations of systems were really low, right? I kind of missed the green screens, right? But I certainly got like the early Windows applications. Like they used to let me design screens.
Yeah.
Right, for like social workers.
Well, your software was coming on CDs.
It was like
you got what you got.
Yeah, it was like look how many fields I just put onto
Exactly.
this screen.
That's
like,
right.
aren't I a winner? Right? And but like it's like what's happened is, my hypothesis is consumer applications have got better and now we expect better business experiences in the business. And so when you're hiring people and they come in and you're putting them in front of an AS400, like they might bounce.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like, hey, we're into a resource constrained employment environment. People aren't going to stick around if they, can't use the systems that you're putting in front of them. So those are all the things that kind of, that change and cause these things to actually happen.
Yeah, and I want to actually double click on that because I think there's something that's bigger than just simply having the AS400 that sends it sends a message. So you're going to do some interviews. You want to bring in new, fresher IT talent, for lack of better. I'm old enough to say younger people because now I'm not one of them. So it's to say like sort of younger people in the younger workforce. But it's not just simply like, okay, you're hired and then day one they start and they're like, oh shit, there's an AS400 system here. This feels bad. When they're touring that office, the vibe will be implicit because the people that you have to keep around to manage that are older. The having servers in a closet is older. Like the whole entire vibe of being outdated permeates from that. You can't hide it behind a couple shiny MacBooks and all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, you have it. Like when you are sort of running on legacy software and hoping to make a sort of a modernization of the business, you really can't do both at the same. Like you have to actually commit to. What am I trying to say here? You can't hide the fact that you're running on those products. You can't hide the fact that you haven't executed anything, more. I don't want to say innovative, but more progressive.
Yeah.
Because that just shows up in so many other areas of the business. And as soon as that person walks in, they're going to see the filing cabinet and they're going to see the fax machines.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of look at it as an entire modernization of the business, but not just to the IT stakeholders or the one customer that's demanding visibility. It's the entire sort of ecosystem and culture of the company that actually will sort of long tail on the backdrop of updating, these systems and modernizing your business.
Yeah. And I mean, there's kind of two things happening is like that idea of the TMS replacement being a proxy for the larger transformation, right?
Right.
That's the thread that we're often kind of pulling upon, right? And then the second thing is like the carriers that we talk to, like some are enormously sophisticated already, right? Like they're running development teams, they've got like Scrum Masters in there, they've got product owners, right? And what happens is they run into these hard constraints when they start to deal with the TMS, which in many cases is kind of the operational kind of heart of the business. So
right.
you can get so far, but you can kind of get no further, and that is also an impetus for kind of change, right? Like the level of sophistication we want in our business is not supported by the software that we have today. Therefore, we have a burning need to kind of do this.
Okay,
right?
So I think I'm brave.
Yep.
And I want to endeavor to modernize my technology stack.
Yep.
It's been 9 3/4 years.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to start. I'm ready to starting this process.
Yep.
I reach out to Rose Rocket.
Yep.
Because that's a smart thing to do, and I'm probably going to reach out to some others as well.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the steps I need to take from that point going forward? So you and I start this conversation. Mm-hmm. What are you telling me to do, and how are you helping me prepare to prepare?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing I would hope that we're doing is just having like an upfront conversation about what your aspirations actually are. So, come in looking for a TMS, but like, what are you really trying to achieve? And like,
Can I ask you a question?
Yep.
Does modernizing your business count as a need?
Not in and of itself. Like,
Yeah.
there's lots of businesses out there that are pretty legacy and do really well.
Yeah.
Like, like if there is no need other than like an itch you need to scratch, then
Right.
I don't know. Like,
Right.
Go learn web development or something like
Yeah.
that. Like,
Right.
I mean,
Right. Yeah.
you'll make yourself happier.
Yeah.
Along the need.
Yeah.
Like, there's got to be something, right, that you can kind of point to. Because what you're going to need to do is build a business case.
And something would, and so let's talk about what are some of those somethings?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, hey, when I want to scale the business, I've got to add people. Right? That's a pretty good indicator that your systems and processes are not supporting anything. So you have a linear increase in orders, and suddenly I've got a linear increase in people. Right. And that should not be the case at all. Right. So you're having to find I'm having to hire and hire and hire because I just have to hire with the volume, and you're going to get more inefficient over time because you're just adding people. Like, that's just the kind of the nature, it's human dynamics, right? So that to me is a pretty good indicator. Your software vendor has got you over a ledge is kind of another one. It was like, hey, guess what? You're the last person on this, and I've seen customers where this has happened, and so we're suddenly going to burden you with like maintenance fees and things like that. Like, that may just create a commercial imperative. The finance organization may need to change, but guess what? The finance function is sitting in the TMS, right? So like, we can't actually work within this. So suddenly we have to externalize the finance system, which means blowing up the TMS. So those sort of things, maybe it's an M&A kind of scenario for some of our larger customers. So, hey, we've just acquired like a whole bunch of businesses and they're all running completely differently. Right. And we got to do something about this because we have no visibility of what's going on. Like, nothing scales. Like, we're worried about the risk profile of running all of this stuff. So those are all things that can kind of lead you into that. I mean, from the customers that I've worked with, just kind of universally, I think where it starts with is an unsettled feeling. Like, that seems to be a common denominator, that they know there is something wrong. And then it becomes, okay, like, we've got to take some cost out of this business. Or we've got like way too much software. We've got to reduce our software complexity. Or guess what? We just acquired a new customer and they're asking us to do something. And that becomes the impetus for actually going off and actually like doing something.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are all good. I mean, those are all points that I think I feel like you've seen all of those. So we've identified that, and let's go with this one. We have a very large customer who requires a level of visibility, integrations, and what have you that just currently are available in my existing system. So therefore, we're going to upgrade to meet that need. And the reason I'm using this example is because from my experience, this is the one that probably drives the fastest change. Because it's sort of it's a reaction to a current business, what would be a construct, and hopefully not for very long. So we'll use that as kind of the push point. This is what I need to solve for. What do I do next?
Right. So, I mean, if you've literally got like a customer banging on the door and they're like, hey, like, we need to know what's going on in the supply chain.
It's kind of like in our contract's coming up in 3 months and we're going to go out to tender and these are the things that are going to be on our, this is the thing that's coming,
I mean, right? Like, the first thing is...
I'm actually pulling out a real example
here. Because if it's like, literally, we've got to save this now, then you're probably not replacing the TMS.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, let's be honest.
That's fair,
like, Yeah, like, it's probably, okay, like, how can we band-aid a solution? Right? How can I give you some advice? Maybe point you at a partner who can kind of help you just kind of solve that problem.
Right.
And then what we can do is talk about what you do in kind of the medium term. So, you do have the agility and the flexibility and the visibility into your systems that you can actually go and enable that kind of scenario, right?
That's actually a good point. So how long should you budget a shift like this?
Yeah.
I know this is size dependent. Well, let's kind of pick a 300 truck carrier, sort of that size. Like, what's a typical... and this is kind of funny for us right now because I know we like to move and we like to move quick, but let's like remove ourselves from this. And I'm a customer who's going to be pragmatic and thoughtful and plan this. How should I be planning this, do you think? Like
at a minimum, you're probably looking at, 9 to 15 months if you execute really efficiently, because guess what you're going to do? You're going to take a critical look at your business and you're going to figure out what the future state needs to look like in some kind of formalized fashion so you can communicate it to other people, right? Rather than just this kind of unsettled feeling. You're going to probably replace a bunch of infrastructure And you might be bringing in new talent into your organization to help you kind of do that as
Right.
well. So those on-premise servers might be going. You might suddenly have some cloud stuff. You might be moving directories around. You might be moving your email system, your collaboration tools, things like that. You're probably going to be replacing the finance system, right? Because you're probably on a TMS that includes integrated accounting. So guess what? That's got to go. And that's a good first thing to kind of do. Like just get the finance organization migrated, and so that they're happy and things like that. And migrating a finance system is also no fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't want an unhappy finance department, as we know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's-
It is like, no one wakes up in the morning and goes like, I'm really looking forward to moving the GL, right? So like, like that is a bunch of work in there.
Yeah.
Like you're probably putting in like some sort of data capability that may not have existed before, and you're thinking about data governance and how you keep that data good. Because guess what? Like that visibility imperative relies on you having kind of good data. And then we might be talking about the TMS at that point, right? And that's a key operational system. You've got to integrate it into a bunch of things. You've got some ELDs out there. You might have some applications that you built already that you've got to figure out, well, how do I unwire it from one thing and wire it into something new? You're taking advantage of new capabilities that you have. So you might be standing up new channels, new portals, new ways of interacting with your customers. So all of that's got to kind of happen. You've got to actually do that technology change. But, you've got to manage the communications, manage the governance, tell people what's going on, train them, and probably then train them again because like whatever you told them like 3 weeks ago probably needs to be reinforced.
Yeah.
You got to get the thing into the world, and then you've got to stabilize it, and then you're back to kind of business as usual. So like if you had change out of that for like 3 quarters to 5 quarters, I think you're actually doing really well.
This feels like building a custom home.
Yeah.
So it's like the design and planning this is generally the feedback. It's sort of a 6-month period.
Yeah.
Figure it out, plan it, design it, structure it. Pick the plot. Where's it going to go? Then start the build.
Yep.
That takes shovel in the ground. That's a year of sort of, maybe it's a little bit longer. Maybe this is not a great example, and this may blow up on me because I hadn't thought this through until I started to say it.
Yeah.
But then it's get it built, get it framed, and then start adding in the, then optimize it basically.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a period of time that I think that is not, I think you kind of hit it nicely, and I used a word it passed me by, but it's to say like you launch it, but then there's a period of, that didn't work the way we thought it would.
Yeah.
That didn't do what we had considered. So like now that's doing new things. So you kind of have to then keep tuning the dial. It's a tuning the dial exercise for a while that kind of goes on for quite a while after you're good. Or you call it stabilized it. So hopefully you're kind of past stabilization, but there's still this kind of ever more dial tuning that you will do for, I don't want to say indefinitely, but for a period of time anyway, that kind of goes beyond just the here you're good, set and forget and keep going. Right?
Yeah. And one of the things, if I kind of look back over my career, like we used to do these things called projects, right? And projects were somebody would sell a piece of work, and then what would happen is like everyone would rock up and like you'd spend like 18 months on a floor somewhere like putting software in. And then you'd go live, and then you'd run around, and you'd make sure you'd stabilize it, and then you're kind of done, right? Like you got to kind of walk away and go, okay, well that was a kind of a job well done. On to the next thing. The reality now is we've become so dependent on this technology that these things are never done,
right?
And that's that pivot from projects to product, right? So you've got to think of this stuff as a portfolio of things that need to be sustained and maintained over time. Right, so this isn't stuff that you're just going to kind of put away and never think about it again. You are always going to be adding and removing features to something, right? Because the software needs to keep evolving. And one of the kind of the great things about software these days is that it's much more built to evolve than what it was.
Right.
Right. So the tools to actually allow people to go and change it to match the business are much stronger than what they used to be. Right. And so, and you got to think about, well, what do I need as an organization to sustain that? Because suddenly there's a layer of governance, there's a layer of talent, there's a layer of just managing that stuff, which is going into the product. It starts to look like our business, right? Which is like, hey, we've got a backlog, we take stuff off the backlog, we build software. Reality is that's what a lot of our customers that are in technology-centric organizations are also discovering, even if they don't think of themselves as software companies.
A quote I love that isn't my own, but I've used it like it is every company is a software company. And I think you just sort of described it in such a way that you have to think like one at least in a sense. Yeah. And that it is ongoing. Now, and I think just to kind of bring it into sort of practical, it's not that you're necessarily continually working on, like, because I think there's this, if you think about some of the legacy systems today, there will be a concerted amount of folks on staff to manage that piece of software, because it's an on-prem application and it requires sort of, butts in the seats to do some of the work. That's not what we're saying, because it's not that you may have some experts for sure, but you're not going to have an engineering team to support, say, Rose Rocket as an example. But what we're saying is that, or Tim is saying, I'm just going to say that it's us because that sounded really smart and I want credit for it, is that there is things are happening, evolving in the world that you may want to add to this software. So it may be that you change your ELD systems for a super easy example, and you want to be able to add that in because that part of the world evolves. Or AI widgets become commoditized and consumable and easy to handle and do things with. Right now, it's very opaque to the average business owner. But in 5 years, it may be very easy to understand what this looks like, and it's a drag and drop application. And so I think having products that allow for you to move other products and other parts of your business around is kind of what Tim is saying here. I just want to make sure we're separating that from kind of the I've got dedicated staff to continually tuning the dials of the TMS itself. It's an entire business ecosystem that will forever be evolving, because as long as technology is evolving, then you really want to give yourself an opportunity to take advantage of that evolution.
Yeah, and so what you see is, like, if you go from like current state for many of our customers, right? Like, they might have someone whose job is it to look after the servers and occasionally tune the database, right? Like when you go to software as a service, you're not going to need that quite so much. But what you are going to need is smart people who understand the capabilities of the systems that you have, the aspirations of the business, and how can we use technology to meet those aspirations, right? And that might be additional capabilities rather than ELD. That might be, hey, there's a large language model we can plug in to do this kind of stuff. Or it might be, hey, we've got a customer that's sending us a bunch of orders. Wouldn't that be great if they could send us over an API? Right? Like, and actually automate part of their business and automate part of our business. And I think the really smart organizations understand the technology and context, and they're doing practical engineering even without engineering staff. Because you can go out and find partners and contractors and things like that to do things like that. But they're seeing the capabilities of the technology to support the business and evolving their product stack to kind of meet that.
So are you seeing any common themes amongst our prospect customer base? And again, just for we're talking more in this show, kind of the mid-market. We'll call it, and for us as a business, it's soft-sided, but we'll define it as 100 trucks or more from an asset-based side of things, or larger brokerages. Are there particular themes that you find interesting, or you draw parallels between? And it's okay if that's no, because that would be almost what I would expect. But are you? Maybe just I'll leave the question there.
I mean, there's some kind of macro stuff, but I mean, the first thing I would say is, like, I've been surprised at the diversity of the customers that we see. Like, particularly on the carrier side, they are actually all pretty unique, right? Like, they are servicing different parts of the market, geographically, the customers that they're going after. That sometimes they're very, very specialized, and you see that in their systems, right? Like, you end up with very customized systems to try and meet that. And so it's really, really hard to kind of say, look, here's the box solution for your problem, right? Because, like, if you just roll that out uncritically, you're just replicating the same problem that they're in kind of today, right? So in some cases, they are, like, very scaled revenue businesses that are very customized, but operating without the sophistication that you might be if you were a $500 million, financial services company, right? And things like that. So that's been kind of interesting, watching sort of catch up to what we might see in other parts of industry. So there's definitely that kind of size of things. But then probably the other thing is, like, coming back to this idea, this is a system that got replaced like 10 years ago. Like, the muscle memory of how to buy software isn't necessarily there. Right. And so it's like, I feel like we're leading them through the process sometimes, right? Where it's like, okay, like, this is how you want to think about this, is how you want to think about this, here you want to think about this. And sometimes it's just like, what you really need is just some good advice. Like, you need someone on your side who can kind of, help you actually through this journey. Like, we're very happy to lead people through this journey, but we're conscious that we're coming at this from a software vendor perspective, and the need is kind of larger than that alone. Right. So just going out and getting some trusted advice, like going and finding a good partner that you can kind of work with, who can help you on that, like, that would be super, super valuable, because your business is getting freight from A to B, right? It's not, I'm off to buy an ERP. Like, that's not something you do very, very often.
Right. And I think that's actually it's something that this industry in the time that I've been, selling software in it has gotten a lot better at, but is still not that good at, which is buying software.
Yeah.
And so I think we've been talking about that in a more fanciful way, most of this, but like practically speaking, how do this goes back to I made this comment earlier, and it's like, I think in the absence of, well, and maybe I'll sort of almost repackage what we've talked about.
Yeah.
So there is the, what's the business plan, or in sort of sales jargon, what's the pain in which that we're going to have to solve? So I'm gonna endeavor to replace the TMS.
Yep.
What's the pain that's worth paying to solve right now? So what am I solving for? You gave some good examples of what those are. And then I go into the market and I'm looking for a TMS.
Yep.
But I really, what am I like? This is where I think it gets really risky as a buyer, potentially, is that you end up in a what you can look at as feature parity.
Yep.
So you're going to say, what has the most features? Because that's the most value. That's the bang for the buck, right? Which one has the power windows, even though I may never use them? So how does one be a little more sophisticated in their approach to comparing softwares even? Not about buying them, but just the comparison part. Because I would imagine that could be very overwhelming.
Yeah. So I mean, there's always a set of features that you need just to run your business, right? And it's always usually less than what you actually think it is, right? Because where people always start from a current state. So I need software that's going to replicate A to B to C to D to E,
right?
Because that's how we work today.
Right. I just want to basically replace my existing TMS.
Yeah, and it's like, no, please don't do that.
Yeah.
And, because you'll just replicate your current set of problems, right?
Right.
Or, the way I kind of think about it is the people
Great
who
call out there.
Yeah,
That's a great call out.
But, the people who are out there with TMSs in the market have kind of got opinions on things.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we have an opinion about how you should plan your orders. We have an opinion about how you should do dispatching. Like, those opinions have value beyond just being a piece of software that you log into. So the opportunities to actually look critically at these things and say, hey, actually, would we be better off adopting the processes that are in these things, right? And you're meeting them kind of halfway. And I think that gets to your point, which is, don't buy software by going, look, do you have, these 12 features? And if you don't have feature number 10, conversation over.
Right.
Look at what you can actually do with it.
Right.
Right. Look at the ability to evolve it over time. Look at the capabilities that it's going to kind of get you. And, that's a much more sophisticated kind of way of looking at it. And you might need some help in actually kind of, figuring that out. But people used to do these strategic plans, right? And it used to be, hey, we're going to do a strategic plan for the next 5 years. I don't even know what I'm having for lunch on Thursday.
Right.
The planning horizons have kind of collapsed.
Yeah.
Right. Because, we're moving in a much faster environment than what we kind of used to be. So assume that your planning horizon, that you've got any kind of certainty for is maybe the next 18 months.
Yeah.
So what can I do to get something that will support me over a period of time where I don't necessarily know all the things which I will need it to do. And that, and this, that informed our product strategy here, but, certainly we're not the only people in the market who have had that insight as well.
Yeah. And I think that's totally fine, because I think for the interest of the audience here, this isn't about Rose Rocket propaganda.
Yeah.
This is about trying to help them make a decision. And if they find Rose Rocket offers the best value, then great. If they find it somebody else, then that's great too.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is I'm really hoping to achieve with that question was, how can we help the listener understand what value looks like and not get sucked into the this is too technical.
Yep.
This is this is over my head, because I understand that in sort of that more mid-market, there will be a lot more technical buyers at the table, so they'll understand these things. But ultimately, there's going to probably be an executive sponsor somewhere along the line who's not a technical person, who's going to have to answer to themselves or the shareholders,
and the board,
or the board, right?
Yeah.
And so from them to be able to have a for this to be a positive experience and to be able to explain it to themselves and to others, I think there needs to be a sense of it. I think we'll go back to the thing that's kind of jumping in my mind here is that it really does come down to that pain or that business value and what I'll call here sort of the North Star.
Yeah.
Because I think as long as you're anchoring to the business objective the whole time, then the features are really they're not part of it. It's like that's just what comes with that's the outcome of solving that problem or going towards that objective, that North Star.
Yeah.
So I think if that's the guiding light of what you're working on and what you're going towards, then it really does I think, simplify the conversation. We're looking to grow the business 2x this year without adding any more bodies. We're looking to get more utility out of our truck. So we don't, again, it's scary. If you're a trucking company, growth can be really scary. Just like, I just picked up a new account. Great. Now I need 20 more drivers and 20 more trucks and 20 more trailers. Like in some case you look at that and say, I don't really want to grow. Right? Because when that account goes away, those trucks and trailers and drivers are still there, hopefully, maybe, or not hopefully. So I think you've got to be growth in an asset-based business that can be, anybody listening to this today, a market that can be brutal at times. I think you've got to be incredibly shrewd with that. So it is about optimization. It is about scale. And we use the word scale in technology like we just throw it around all the time. And I don't know if people even appreciate what it means. And I think the important part to understand is that it means different things to different businesses. And it can even mean something different to your business than somebody else's business, even that's in the same space as you. So we can think about scale as adding, we can think of it as it's ultimately multiplying revenues or business outcomes without adding more human capital. It's probably the simple way of putting it. But that can be in the driver space. That can be in your CSR spaces. That can be in accounting. It can be in any department creating scale where that is. But I think that really at a trucking company it's not something that has been readily available for trucking companies, really. That's just hasn't been a thing. The operating systems have been there to serve the operations as a way of record keeping, really. And so I think it's an amazing time in trucking where scalability is actually now really, I think for the very first time, becoming something that's real. Where there's enough data, enough mature product in the market where you can start to put these things together to create a scalable trucking organization. I don't think you could have said that 10 years ago.
And I mean, the North Star, I mean, the other thing that, if I was going to equip an executive to make a change like this, and I think you kind of hit upon it, it's that business case. Right? How do I build the case for change in quantitated numbers to actually go and enable this? Because ultimately, to what you said, people are answerable to a board, they're answerable to investors, right? So, they are going to want to see what the impacts on cash flow are. They're going to want to see what the impacts on staff are. They're going to want to see, are there any kind of top line benefits to this thing? I think we could have a healthy debate about top line benefits in TMS system.
Sure,
But I mean, certainly there is always, opportunities to take cost out of the business to enable that scaling or redeploy the people that you have into the things that actually allow your business to scale rather than just robotically operating business processes, right? And, that to me is the promise of these kind of systems, right? Which is how can I take people who, are probably having a pretty unfulfilled experience, and actually turn them into something which is, kind of powering the growth of this organization. I think on a good day, that's what software actually enables you to do.
Would a vendor help with a process like that? Would a vendor would Rose? I'll just say Rose because I can't speak for others. But would Rose Rocket help with that business plan? How does Rose Rocket get involved in a process like that?
Yeah. We do this all the time, and I mean, just kind of selfishly, we're doing that on the way to, hopefully helping our customers use our systems and buying our systems. But I recognize that this is part of the process that needs to go through. Vendors, good vendors will help with this because they will recognize that this is part of the success of the systems that they're putting in. But, likewise, there's lots of places out there that you can go off to get help. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in consultancies. Consultancies are great at this kind of stuff.
Wait, hold on a sec. Didn't you do an ebook for us or something? Didn't I see that?
Yeah, that's the rumor.
Okay, so rumor has it there's an ebook.
Might even be a webinar.
Is that and a web? Okay, so is that this? What we're talking? What is that?
Yeah, that's part of this. So this is the objective with that was to be at 60,000 feet. I don't know, is that too high? Where did jets fly? 50?
60 seems high.
Yeah. I don't want to be in space.
No, let's do a quick Vancouver to Seattle trip at a cool 12,000 cruising altitude.
Okay, to be at an altitude and say, look, this is an overview of the process, and the overview of the process is hey, what kind of stuff do I need to do this? How long is it going to take? How do I build the case of change? In the constraints of 2,000 words, there's only so much detail that you're going to get into.
Yeah.
But, there's enough in there that I hope that someone look at this as here's the bill of materials I need for this change. I
Yeah.
need to go off and do all of these kind of things.
Yeah.
Right. And so that can be a starting point. And then it's like, all right, what are all the conversations I need to have? Like conversations with vendors, conversations with, partners who can help me kind of navigate this change, conversations internally. Like, how do I sell this internally?
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can't go and make this kind of change by yourself. I don't care how senior you are. Like, you've got to have the buy-in of everybody, whether the explicit buy-in, because guess what? The board's signing off on this thing, or implicit buy-in of like, I need to get all my operations people on side. Otherwise, they're going to kind of leave. So it's a guidebook for that, recognizing that a lot of the customers that we're working with, these systems have been, like, they're part of the furniture.
Yeah.
Right? They went
Yeah.
in a decade ago, 2 people ago, don't even know how that kind of happened. The muscle memory to do this isn't necessarily there because guess what? You've just been fighting fires for the last decade to enable that growth that we just kind of talked about.
That's
you haven't
it.
had time to look at this thing, and suddenly it's like, off burning in the closet somewhere, right?
And that's so hard, I think, in trucking to go away from hair on fire businesses where you're probably, again, I'm thinking a certain sort of company profile here, but you've probably got a relatively limited IT resource that has been largely reactive to large customer. I'll say this very specific, but it's familiar probably to the listeners, like large customer EDI integrations probably,
Yes.
right? That's like your whole
Yeah.
tech team's been doing that basically.
Yeah.
And it breaks and then they have to respond to work on it. So it's really difficult, I think, to even get, even from an ownership level, 12,000 feet up, which isn't, this isn't the proverbial 30,000 foot even,
Yeah.
to say, like, we need to do something more strategic. We need to put down a plan and do this work. But I think what I'm encouraging you to do, leaders and owners, is to, and Tim said it beautifully, I think, it's like, have the courage to do that, because that is the at this moment in time, and this is a fleeting moment, and I think it's almost past us now, because I've been saying this for a while and I've been watching this happen. Like, technology can still be, but not for much longer, a competitive advantage for you, because there is still a decent amount of your peers and competitors that have not taken the moment to do that thing. So like, now is the time. But when I said that same statement a year ago, that peer group has shrunk meaningfully.
Yep.
And so the change is happening right now, with or without you. And I would encourage you to at least step up and take a look at that. And I think, in the time that you and I have worked together, and I've watched you work with some of our prospects who are now customers, you are incredibly consultative and I think really honest. Like, I'm not suggesting that people should reach out to Tim to have him consult on a whole bunch of things for you, because we do need him working at Rose Rocket. But he's a smart guy who knows a lot of things about a lot of things when it comes to business transformation. And I don't know that he would know any other way but to be honest. And even if that didn't mean revenue for Rose Rocket, I think honesty is probably your default position. It seems to be anyway, when I've sort of watched you go about working with our customers and again, prospects. And so I think that, just as a plug here, and I don't know if I've ever done this on the show, but I would say, if you have questions, if you are considering doing something or considering doing something, I think Tim's a great place to start, and he'll point you in the right direction. And I don't know that he's super married to if that leads to commercials with us, because he seems to have a giver's gain mentality on things. And ultimately, good things happen to good people. So as long as we run that playbook, then, all things will work out in the end. But on an individual level, I'm pretty convinced he's going to give you sage advice that's really agnostic to Rose Rocket's agenda. So look him up, try it.
Yeah, I'll jump on a call for an hour with anybody,
Yeah,
right? Because like the fact that I get to talk to somebody as they go through the journey, that's an enormous privilege for me.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
You're sharing a whole bunch of, pretty deep issues. It's like, the least I can do is give you my thoughts.
Okay. Well, it's been a privilege having you, and it's a privilege having you work here, and it's a privilege being able to have you on the podcast and then do podcasts in person, which I've really become a big fan of, but they don't happen all the time. So, man, great show. Thank you for everything, and thanks for the great insights.
Been a pleasure to be here.
All right, right on. And don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you on the other side. That kind of rhymed. Peace.